because of some form of positive action, you find women in girls and boys are equal at some part. But after a while, there's a gap. And
in
then,
fact, at some levels of secondary school, there are more girls than boys. But then the higher up you go in education,
yes,
the girl numbers
yes,
the female numbers start
yes,
to tail off.
and
there are more women in the law in certain respects.
And yet we are not that much. We cannot be at par with them. We are not, as of now.
Seriously?
No, as of now, we are getting the prizes. You get the women having the best prizes, the best this, the all-round prize. But when you come into the workplace, there's a subtle glass ceiling. And I always tell my friends who are younger, when they start complaining, I'll say, oh, welcome to the real world place of work.
Even in the law.
In the law, in academia, everywhere. Because there's that perception, well, we have the role to play in getting married, childcare, maintenance, and support. And that role is seen as, it's not a respected role. I remember when I was young and I got employed into the bank, I went to the banking hall, and the lady, God bless her soul, she became very good to me. But when I got to the banking hall, I heard her calling HR. She was virtually in tears and telling HR, I told you I don't want any young girl in my office. I don't want any young girl in this bank. And she was so I was so sad.
Why? She assumed that you would get pregnant quite
exactly,
quickly.
The stereotypes,
and you'd cost the company
and she was virtually in tears. Okay, she's no more, but later we became the best of friends. So when I heard her virtually in tears telling HR that she didn't want me there, of course I was quite brokenhearted, but that made me determined that she really loved to have me there. And so that was it. I worked hard, extra hard, I must say. Honestly, when you are faced with this, you have to work extra hard, maybe twice harder, And so I did that. And after a while, she was very impressed with me. She became my very good friend and even my confidant, and that was it. So,
but interesting,
the stereotype,
that the challenge that you faced was not from a man in that case.
It was from a woman.
Making assumptions about what you would do and how your career would progress.
Yes, and trust me, sometimes the challenges are not from the men, it's from the women because of the stereotype, okay? I go into politics and the women, there's a book, When Hens Begin to Crow. There's that perception that hens I think hens do not crow or something.
Well,
but
they might cluck rather than crow.
Or whatever. So there's this study in Uganda of women in politics, and they are resented so much because the perception of politics is that it's not for service; it's more for money making. It's a perception, and so it's perceived that the men should go there because they are the natural breadwinners, so that they can take care of the women and other matters. So I remember the few times I've contested elections, I've had women come to me and tell me that, oh, we wish we could help you, but you see, the men, they will take care of us. They will, and when they tell me that, I just smile because I know what is going to happen in the end. In the end, they are nowhere to be found because the men will not take care of them.
The men will vanish.
They would not take care of them even if they win. So it's a perception. And you keep having it there. It's from women. Sometimes they are even wondering if you are the normal woman because you are outspoken. A woman is supposed to be quiet, gentle, submissive, name all of it.
Silent if possible.
And sometimes even stupid. Okay, you can be cheated and you shouldn't talk. And people who are even less endowed in terms of education than you, your artisans, mechanics, and all that, think they can cheat you because maybe you don't really understand, forgetting that you've spent maybe more years in the classroom than them and can do the math better. It's a perception and it's out there, and we can't do much about it. We just have to keep working hard, extra hard. I remember, yes, Madame Joyce Aye. She's also a role model. I remember,
Minister of Education.
Yes, when we were in Volta Hall, I was the JCR president, and as part of our week, we went to, I think Hall Week, we went to visit, and I remember she was then the Ministry of Education. She was at the Ministry of Education, and she was the Minister for Secretary. They called them secretaries at that time, and she said, you're a woman, so as women, you have to work twice as hard as the men to be recognized. And that has kept me going all these years. And I've told my daughters that that's how, you're a woman, and when you are even in the West, you are also African. So you have to work 3 times harder than the average person to be recognized, because there are all these stereotypes out there. There are all these stereotypes out there. Recently, I contested the elections, and it was as if hell had broken loose.
Oh, now, Auntie Gloria, can you hold fire with that? Because I hope we'll take a short break and come back to that, the thing of women in public life, and particularly women in public office, which, of course, is part of the subject of the Affirmative Action Act that is now to be enforced. Because we have had just joining us in the studio the very glitzy Queen of Glitz Africa, Claudia Luma. Say happy International Women's Day to you, Claudia.
Thank you, Nana. Thank you. Same to you as well, and your listeners.
Lovely to see you as usual. But we'll take a little bit of a break and come back, because you and Auntie Gloria have some very similar experiences there with running in public life. We hope we will also be speaking to Kosi Menu, Akosua Menu, who again has a very similar experience of the whole thing of women in public life, perceptions of women and how they affect women. I'm sure you have a lot to say on the subject, but don't go away. You're tuned to 99.5 The Forum on Asaase in Accra, coming to you from 75th Circular Road, and we'll go for a short commercial break and speaking to you in just a moment. Stay tuned.
Educated, talented, she knows her worth. She's cultural, a woman of substance. And when she walks, the world will stop and stare. She's a woman. she knows her worth. She's graceful, a woman of substance. And when she walks, the world will stop and stare. She's a woman. The world will stop and stare. She's a woman.
And yes, so you're through still to the forum on the on Asaase 99.5 on International Women's Day. And yes, I've been getting quite dizzy with the flow of women through the doors here at the Kwekwe studio. It's like you're just settling down to one side because there's another load of people whiz in and whiz out and whiz round again. But you know, that's what women do. They like to confuse people all the time. We've been keeping the conversation going, and it's been very insightful and energetic too. We had first off in the studio, those of you who tuned in earlier, sorry if you missed her, Nanoye Bampo Addo, was here in the studio, the Deputy Chief of Staff. And we were joined first out of the blocks, of course, by Elizabeth Ohene, the doyen of Ghanaian journalism, en route to a funeral and still not letting it stop her from sharing her International Women's Day with us. We're very glad to have heard from her and have the chance to talk to her. And we also spoke to Okbel Majdoub Bidwe, or Bidwe Majdoub, should I say, of Jakarta Fashions, who was on the line, and Dr. Angela Jamina Abwaje of the ARC Foundation. They've all had to go off in the way that women do. You know, they say the personal is political. So they join us to celebrate International Women's Day, but they have to attend to personal business, and so they have gone off to attend to other matters in life. But we have three eminent women joining us here in the studio, and I'd like them just to take the chance to say hello, and then we'll read some Facebook comments. So joining us in the, shall I say, the Ecru corner, I have no idea about colours. You'll gather this from my vague guessing at the colour she's wearing this morning, is Claudia Lamont of Glitz Africa. We say good morning to you, Claudia, again.
Good morning, Naraya. How are you?
I'm very, very well, and lovely to see you in the studio, and also glowing in the blue and green and black and white corner. We have, you heard earlier on, Gloria Ofori-Boadu. You're also the chief executive and founder of WABA.
Yes, Women Assistance and Business Association.
You have had your fingers in so many pies, from local government to start-up business for women. And hello again, Auntie Gloria.
And fish and poultry, agribusiness.
And agribusiness,
yeah,
which we'll no doubt hear about in the midst of our discussion of women in politics in particular, because the third guest in our studio for International Women's Day now, for the second half of the programme, is Akosua Asa Menu. Cozy Ozy. Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year to you. I think it's the first time I'm coming here since the year began.
You know, well, we're very glad to have had an excuse to drag you in. Formerly of the National Youth Authority and formerly Director of Communications in the Office of Deputy Director of Communications in the Office of the First Lady, and former aspirant to parliamentary office, which is something that unites all three of you, and I'd like us to have a little bit of a discussion about that. But good morning to some of the people who are watching us on Facebook now. Now, this is a man of whom I'm always proud. He's one of our biggest fans on Facebook, and he always has such interesting things to say. Abdul Basit Mahama, who has been in this studio before, and he says a CDD Ghana 2020 study, that's Center for Democratic Development Ghana, found that many women in Ghana voted along party lines rather than for candidates who supported women's empowerment. Are these decision patterns economic or historical, or obeying the magnetic field interactions of like poles repelling? I'm sure we'll get a chance to discuss that maybe as we go on. Does like repel like? And we often hear women support women, he says, but in Ghanaian politics, do women in opposing parties genuinely support each other? Isn't it partisan politics overriding gender solidarity? And who's to blame? Eunice Champama greets us from the UK and says, Abdul Basit Mahama, he's already getting into debate with him, women have every right to make a political choice. I believe when it comes to issues concerning women, we take a holistic approach and objective to that, such as domestic abuse and so on. How can a man kill a woman for cheating on him? Why? Can you believe that in this day and age, some men can't stand to win arguments against women? Well, she says, I mean to say, can't stand to lose an argument against women. I think we knew exactly what she meant, Eunice Champama. Samuel Ofosuba says, good morning, Yaa Mensah. Oh, I like my new name. And your beautiful panelists. The general pattern of voting in our community, i.e. both genders, doesn't specifically gear itself towards favoured policies that will enhance our current and future welfare. Auntie Gloria, the point that you made about planning for the future. Samuel Ofosuba is saying it's nothing to do with that. We don't think about our future. We vote impartially as to maintaining or bringing our political party to power. I think he's saying that we vote along party lines, purely. This has affected our socio-economic development, and it's ruining the natural growth of our country. We need to be reasonable and circumspect in our decisions taken, especially when casting the vote in choosing leadership who decide to steer our destiny to prosperity. Let me pause there for a moment on the comments and perhaps come to you first, Claudia, of Blitz Africa. So you're sitting there looking nonchalant and, you know, as if it's just another breezy morning, but we know that in addition to the work that you do with your publishing and events emporium, that you have had a lot of work on your hands with trying to push through for women politically. You stood as the parliamentary candidate, or you stood for the parliamentary nomination in Ofurikrum in the Ashanti region at the last election, 2024. I wanted to ask you, first of all, just on a gut level, whether the experience of running for that parliamentary nomination was a shock to the system, or did you, in your usual way, just roll with the punches and just get on with it?
Thank you, Nana, and happy International Women's Day to all women listening, and to the men as well, to our wives and mothers and everyone. For me, I think I had a few shocks, but in the bigger scheme of things, I think I just went with the flow of it. Because I've had a career of 15 years, and my journey has always been championing women leadership in the country. I run a female magazine, and I have run the Ghana Women of the Year honors. I have run the Ghana Female CEOs Summit, which we've run for 8 years, bring top 500 women in the country, in business, in government, all of them together to have conversations like this. And I have run the She Summit, which does mentorship for women in tertiary institutions around the country. So we've done all of this, and then I've done the She Boards as well, which we do in other countries as well. We just don't host it in Ghana, we host it in New York, we host it in London, Nigeria is going on in May, August is in South Africa. So it's also bringing top quality women bosses together. And that's something that I've run globally as well. And I've received a lot of achievements and awards and whatever from what I've done for women on the continent and in the country.
So you have not just a national vision, not just a national vision, but you have a Pan-African vision.
Absolutely, because for me, And I am a feminist. Anybody that knows Claudia Kwartin Luma knows I'm a feminist, yeah? Because being a feminist is about being fair. It's about fairness. And that's what I believe in. And going into politics, I mean, I had people, even BBC, when they interviewed me, like, why do I want to build such a great career for myself on the continent? Why am I shifting into politics? And for me, it wasn't about why am I shifting into politics. For me, politics is about people. What I've done all the time was to build platforms that engage people, that bring people together, being an enabler, being a convener. And what better way is to keep doing what I'm doing, creating impacting people, than to be in politics. The work is on the ground.
How did you think that as an MP you could specifically enable women in Oforikrom, in the Ashanti region, in Ghana in general?
For me, it's about empowering women. It's also about serving as inspiration to a lot of women. I understand how my personality, I understand who I am, I understand how my personality and my brand impacts young people, even women and even men. And for me, it's about shifting the same brand, respectable brand that I built for myself in business and in corporate and within. I've also been a UN ambassador, Goodwill ambassador for 6-7 years before I moved into politics. So for me, policy making and impact work, my vision and my calling, really, I say all the time, is I am an impact driven person. So everything I'm doing is all about making sure I'm achieving impact. I'm a very intense, serious personality. So when people come around me, sometimes they don't even know what to do with me, because
You don't have time
for
for time wasters. Yes,
You know?
you're just getting on with it.
Yes, I just get on with it, because that's I'm very focused and I'm very quite intense and intentional with what I'm doing, because I understand my calling, I understand my purpose and what I'm trying to achieve. So for me, when moving that into Oforikrom and moving that to Ashanti region already, we're known for having very strong women, right? So serving as an inspiration for younger women was something that was really driving my passion to go into politics. And the women are older women. Life doesn't just end when you retire. What are we offering to these women to still have a lifestyle even after retiring? What about women who are not educated, who never had access to education, who never had access to great health? What are we doing? And that's the kind of thing, as a woman, that a lot of people look up to me. That's what I was hoping to move that into such a constituency. And I started the work already. I've been engaging and building women in the constituency, empowering them through skills, empowering them, bringing women who have achieved into the constituency, into the university already, talking to them, engaging them, doing mentorship for them, giving them skills trainings. It was something I was doing for years before people even encouraged me that, Claudia, you really need to come to the forefront, instead of really doing this for years from the back. So I pray that the impact that we made there will stay and continue. And because I didn't win the primaries doesn't mean I stopped doing what I'm doing, because it's more of a calling for me than the title for me.
Now, you made a great point of that, very generously saying, even after you didn't win the nomination, that you were carrying on campaigning in the constituency to support the candidate selected by the party that you ran for, the NPP. I wondered, though, whether you thought that there were specific factors that pushed back against you in running for the nomination that are specifically to do with you being a woman, or was it just that you were a rookie, that you needed a bit more traction, to do a few, to bed in longer with the community? What were some of the factors that you came up against in running for that nomination?
I try to look at life without saying that I'm not doing something because I'm a woman. I always, even if it's staring me in the face or whatever, I try to move past that. So maybe it could have been part of it, but to me, I wouldn't even allow it to affect me that way, because for me, I never see woman, I just see a person. In business, when I go into a boardroom, I don't see a woman. I see Claudia as a person here to close a deal, because I am great and fantastic at closing deals. And that's what I do, and that's why I'm in this room. So I never see gender or woman as a reason why something didn't happen. I went in, I made sure that the people, the delegates, understood where I stood as a woman, as a person, and my intention for the constituency, my intention for older people, my intention for women, my intention for young people, businesses in the constituency. How do we create businesses from the constituency, using businesses in the constituency? So we are not going to rely on the government to develop the constituency. But sometimes it's the people you're talking to, how they're receiving the message. You may have the vision, but can they see the vision themselves? And unfortunately, maybe they didn't see it and it didn't happen. But for me, what I saw was people sometimes they think that you're a bit younger. I'm turning 45 this year, so I know I'm like, I'm not even that
And
young.
don't look at a day older than 20. Yes.
You know, it's strange because actually they thought I was 30 or something. So I realized that, you know, people actually sometimes, they see politics as something for older people. So when you're engaging people, and especially in an area or in an industry that majority are men, and you're also a woman, they think that you're too young. And when you're telling them, how they're receiving it is different from when a man is standing in front of them. No matter, because my competitors, I was older than them. I was older than the person that won, right? But they will see the man more, maybe, I don't know, maybe the person is a man. So I think maybe that's something that we need to look at.
Absolutely. And that's where I disagree with you, that you may see it just as the person standing in front of you, but it goes back to what Auntie Gloria was saying earlier on about perception, and other people's perception of what women can do. Cozy, if I can turn to you and your own experience. Now, you managed, against all odds, to get the nomination for the party you're standing for, and won the chance to run in Adinta, one of the biggest constituencies here in Accra. Before we come to the business of the legislation and, you know, the Affirmative Action Act and all that, again, your experience of actually engaging in that race, what were some of the factors that you came up against in running in the December 2024 election?
Right. So good morning to all your listeners, co-panelists, viewers everywhere. Happy International Women's Day. I'm particularly excited when it comes to IWD, because over the last couple of years, well, it's been around for a minute, but it's taking the form of an annual event into a movement where women are championing economic reforms. They are pushing for better policy inclusion, and even in Ghana, the momentum is quite remarkable. And I'm happy that we are tapping into all these vehicles to empower women and keep, you know, uplifting women. And now my experience, it's no different from what Claudia experienced, because in our primaries we're comparing notes. Now the challenge for women in politics, first off, is acceptance. You're a woman. In certain areas, the idea that is a female going to lead is a problem for some, and not only for men, even for women. And the age factor also comes into play. Oh, you hear things like, oh, she's a small girl, very, very small girl. And Claudia Bowley mentioned her age. I'd go with my football age on the program.
But yes, another person who doesn't look a day over the age of 20, but we know you are possibly above the age of 30.
Yeah, so it's the challenge comes right from internally being accepted. There's some sort of resistance, and we're even discussing, a bunch of us were discussing that. After the primaries, typically whoever wins, everybody should rally behind. We spend a lot of time building bridges, reconciliation. It takes a toll on the campaign. Then you have to sit down and then strategize. You have your ideas, and then there's a resistance of, oh, this is how we've been doing it. Oh, can we try another way? So you have to find a way to balance all of that without necessarily losing touch as a female, and not it being taken in the wrong form, that you are being, when the men show, when they are courageous and firm, it's just they are brave. When the women do it, they are arrogant. And those tags and those labels are so easy to throw at women in politics. I remember going through, one of my friends, he's not Ghanaian, he joined me on the campaign trail, and when we were done at the end of the day, he said, what I find so amazing is that women actually support you. But where he's from, it's difficult for female candidates to get the support of women. Often it's the men that support them before the women come on board. But the women do not are not as supportive. And it was quite sad in a way, because usually when you step into the fray, you would expect women to accept, because you would understand their issues and challenges better. But my experience was different in my race, because a lot more women were accepting. I had grandmothers, they see you and give you such a warm hug, like they've known you forever. And that interaction was so healing, it was so comforting. And it was just little things that needed to be fixed. And they were confident that once you were at the helm of affairs, those problems will be solved. Is affirmative action bill coming into play is not just talk. We need to actually walk it. There are financial barriers that block women from competing in elections. In any election, the amount of money you need to raise will just is hell.
It's like an endless money just
Yes,
going down a
and
plug hole endlessly.
You hear things like, "Oh, we like you, but if you don't have money, it'll be difficult to vote for you." Things like that.
They tell you that to your
They
face.
tell it to your face. From right through all the engagements of every female parliamentary candidate had the biggest challenge, raising resources, and it's easier for the men. Interestingly, the men actually think that it's easier for the women to raise resources to run a campaign. But ultimately, we need a lot more women to take up leadership roles. It's not necessarily all in the politics, but in the home, in the offices, in the churches, the associations, the groups. Take up leadership roles. Do not limit it to, there's a woman in the room, oh, you're in charge of the cooking. Oh, there's a woman in the room, you're in charge of the service. Oh, there's a woman in the room, who's going to tidy up after. Take part in the decision making. Let your voice be heard. Even if they're not going to take your suggestion, be comfortable with voicing your opinion, because often women feel, if I say something, next time they call a meeting, they're not going to call me because I'm being too opinionated
And controversial.
yeah, controversial, exactly. And these labels, it's frustrating because you hear them and it's like, why am I bothering? Because all I want ultimately is to make a difference and to make an impact. So,
I wanted to ask, is the problem of financing to do with the problem of approach, in that female candidates putting themselves up for public life, which is very much the objective of one of the things that the Affirmative Action Act is looking to promote, are looking to finance themselves in the same way as male candidates do, which is finding big backers, big financiers, offering them big ticket money and investing in their campaign. And maybe what women should be doing is returning almost to a convention People's Party model. We talked about the difference that Nkrumah made with the specific legislation that he put in place in 1960 for our first Republican government to return 10 female MPs. He did that for a reason. His first organizers in the CPP, his first organizer was Hannah Kudjo, was a woman. Some of his major financiers were people like Dede Ashikisha, Rebecca Aite, and Akwa Shoshosho, who I've only discovered. Big-time market women. I believe one of the market women who backed him was the first woman to open a bank account with Standard Chartered in Accra, and set that model of women who usually used to keep their cash under their mattress, and actually turning to formal financial banking services if they were really worth it. Should women be looking to the unusual sources of finance if they want to go into political life, or people who can give them small, but many more women clubbing together to finance political candidates?
okay, so when it comes to fundraising for a campaign, it is not just about big backers. Every little bit counts. So from your family support, friends, network, they say your network, determines your net worth. It really is it, because you'd have people that you've gone to school with reaching out to you to say, I've seen the good work you're doing, here you go. Or I've seen you on TV and you speak so well, here you go. So it's how you've been able to brand even yourself over time for people to build belief in you. But like you said, if people don't have a history of probably having gone to some great schools or having a good network of family support, how does that leader emerge without resources? So it means we need to have systems in place. Women are 50% of Ghana's population, but we only have 20% representation in parliament. Now, what you said was profound. Nkrumah deemed it
What representation?
20%.
It's under 15%, I believe it is still.
It will be less now because
This is 276,
It's only
yes.
40 of them that are women now.
Yes, well, same as in the last parliament. It hasn't changed.
It's never met the 15% mark before.
Okay, so
It is worse in Nigeria. In Nigeria, it's under 5%, I believe. That's
So-
not small comfort.
then it means that if it has to be a policy, then we have to look at the model Nkrumah used and say this is a quota of representation. These seats should be marked for women. Both parties, including minority parties, fill the female
Can I add
candidates.
something to-
Hopefully.
Yes, I'll
that
come to
could
you in a moment,
that could
Laura.
potentially increase the representation and the activism, and maybe help us get to where we're going. But if we're to leave it as it is, the appetite to fight and claw and push is not it's literally making it seem that you have to be unreasonable as a woman to actually survive in the politics. But that's what often we find ourselves in, because you unlock a certain level of character that you didn't even think was possible. Your resilience beyond resilience. It's in the
Your
face,
toughness beyond
your
toughness.
toughness in the face of disrespect, in the face of people who do not want to compromise, in the face of people who just look at you that you're a female and you have nothing to offer. You are here just because of luck, or somebody you say, oh, you're probably good looking, that's why you're
You
here.
must be
But
somebody's girlfriend, is the one that
it's
people
the-
usually have
yeah,
hold of them.
common
But
parlance. So it is what it is, but we have to be very, very intentional if we want to see women representation increase.
Now, Claudia, I know you're dying to leap in, but I must turn to Auntie Gloria because of what Cozy mentioned there about the thing of representation and perhaps having quotas for women. This is something that has been tried in other countries, even in the UK, which famously elected a huge cohort of women into Parliament, for example, under Tony Blair. In the landmark 1997 election, was it? The resistance to women being imposed, it was seen as, by the Central Party on constituencies who had their local boy, usually somebody not going to go very far with his political life, but they were insistent they would rather have somebody they had chosen, almost always a man rather than a woman, selected very carefully by central office, whether that was Labour central office or whether it's Conservative central office. The women A-list candidates was particularly a Labour Party policy in the UK. There's a suggestion that somehow these changes to representation of women, particularly in Parliament, only happen when you have an extreme event. So the example that is always held up is Rwanda, where they have in excess of 50% across both the House of Deputies and the Senate. I think it averages just under 54% and is particularly marked in the House of Deputies. But people post-rationalizing have said the only reason why Rwanda was able to achieve that was because of the genocide. So many people went away to war and died, and then after the settlement in Rwanda, they had to get on with it and rebuild their country. And there are a lot of women around who took advantage of the opportunity, went out, got themselves the experience, the skills, the education, and put themselves up for election. And so people will vote for them because it's a mainly female-dominated society. Do you need an extreme event to bring about those changes in representation?
You need, Akosia just used the word intentional, right? You need to make it intentional. So in Rwanda, we have a specific provision for women alone to be elected to parliament, a certain specific provision. It's intentional. So we have women representatives. Those who find themselves getting elected are only women on the ballot paper. It's intentional. Then in addition to the intentional aspect, there's also the normal elections where we have women and men contesting. So and then youth also have, I think, a quota. Same in Uganda. So by the time the outcome comes, there are those who went through the regular elections with both male and female candidates. Then there are the women-only elections candidates.
And that's where
then
you
when
tip
they
over the
merge them-
balance to positive discrimination, which is the thing that gets most people's backs up more than anything else. That you have a special election set aside where women are given that it's the leg up that you need to achieve equity, which is precisely the objective of our current legislation. But they say, why are you making exceptions
Well,
for
I
women?
guess they have found out the benefits of doing that. And so because of that, when we take the world, at first it was the Scandinavian countries which led the quota of having more women in their parliaments. But now Rwanda tops. And then South Africa also has something. It's not the winner take all where, we practice in Ghana. You have one vote and just one vote can take you to parliament or into government and leave out the representation of those who didn't vote for a person. But with South Africa, they have some kind of elections where it's the party that gets elected. So if we have a Bwakwa South constituency where I contested, the NDC party will be voted for, the MPP will be voted for, the CPP, the PNC, and the less known parties. And then based on how much they win at the end of the day, the party itself will sit down and select the representatives for the area.
A system of proportional representation, in effect.
So they call it, I don't like using big words because it confuses everybody. That's why I've gone to the. So at the end of the day, you find that the party, after they won the percentage, you say, okay, now come with your representatives to the parliament. And so they will have the chance to choose Cozy and my lady here and myself, or you, because of your, very important political background, but I'm not going there.
Thank you very much. It doesn't
So,
exist.
well, you are not political, but you have some links to Brangahafu region where I grew up.
They don't know I exist.
Okay, so that's how they do it. So at the end of the day, they are able to get some amount of men and women in government. That's South Africa. They use the term proportional representation, but I don't like terms. I like simplifying stuff.
Describing what it is.
In the UK, I remember I was invited by Foreign and Commonwealth Office as a guest around the Tony Blair time. And when I got there, I was very impressed because around that time, there had been the highest number of women in Parliament. And it's also because they used a system where
The A-list candidate system,
Yes,
but
where-
against great pushback by the local parties.
Where,
they didn't like it.
well, they wouldn't even, because it's giving women an opportunity. Anytime a marginalized group is given an opportunity, hell breaks loose. But we have to be insistent and show them the benefits. It's like taking girls to school. There was a time it was not allowed by families. You don't take the royal families will not take their girls to school because it wasn't allowed. I mean, they have to be protected and all that. But now a lot of queen mothers are very educated in literacy and numeracy. It wasn't, and even there was a time royal chiefs were not allowed to go to school, and when they are going, they'll go with their servants who go and study.
You go and do the studying for us. I have a thing or two to say about refusing women to be.
But in the UK, there was a time that they had a list where a constituency would take one man, one woman, one man. So if a Bwakwa South takes one man, the next one will have to take a woman. If Adenta takes a woman, the other one, Madina, will have to take a man. That's how they did it. And so at the end of the day, they got the highest number of women representation in Parliament. So it has to be intentional.
And it comes and goes in waves, Anti-Gloria, because after that A-list experiment with the departure of the Labour government, I must say, even
The
though
Conservatives-
the Conservatives, although they're very good at electing women, again, as exceptions, as their leaders, they had a little bit of an A-list experiment under David Cameron as Prime Minister, and again, there was a huge backlash against it. But Claudia, you were going to say something earlier on in response to what Cozy was saying about the pushback that she faced in her own constituency.
I think she ended nicely on that, so I think I will actually let that go. But since you're on the affirmative action,
Anti-Gloria.
I would say, and maybe add to what Gloria was saying with being intentional, It is a
Yeah,
keeper.
Kosi said that and I liked it.
Yeah, it's a keeper because for me, for 15 years, we've been trying to pass this act, right? Finally,
30 years.
finally last year they made it into law. But what are the progressive measures that we are taking as a nation to make sure that it's not just an act on a book, just sitting down and looking pretty? I know that they set up a committee. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a committee. I don't know if it's a working committee or there's meant to be a committee.
There is meant to be a committee, and we were discussing about when they would get round to
Okay, so it's
deciding
not
the
even
members
set
of
up yet.
these. I don't believe it is. I believe a superior legal brain like Auntie
Yeah.
Glorious can fill us in, but I think that they're still deciding the membership.
Because
It'll take
my
them some time.
fear is we would do this really good job that we've done, passing this into a law now, and it will just sit there and it will not make any impact, and it will all be like, oh, we've done it. So being intentional to make sure that it's going across from political to business and everything, there's incentive for companies who are actively or intentionally making sure that in their management, in all parts of their businesses, they're bringing women up and they're meeting. Because when I saw the act, I was like, this is very ambitious of us, because we are saying that 2024, was it 2024, 2025? We want to be 30%. And by next year...
I think it's by 2030 that the
by
30%.
2030, we want to be 50%.
Okay,
That's what,
Okay,
That's what
I thought it was
saw.
30 by 30% and then 50
No,
by
30
20.
by 2024, 2025.
Okay,
And then
30
35
by
by
2030.
by 30 we should be 50%. But that's very ambitious for a country that we've just passed this into law, saying that by 2030 we want to have 30% representation across. There's a whole cultural shift. Number one, we know this is Africa, this is Ghana. People don't believe in female leadership. People are sabotaging women. How are we going to move from that to that to even achieve 70% of that? We have to be intentional. There has to be conversation. There have to be traditional conversation with traditional leaders, to all of that, judiciary level, every sector. There has to be conscious. We have to be intentional if we really even want to achieve 70 or 60% of our vision. But if not, then it'll just be sitting there pretty. And even I want to see maybe Ministry of Finance and all of that. What are they putting? Is there a specific budget to make sure that this affirmative action bill, there's a budget to make sure that it's actually going to be used, to make sure that, and what are the annual review or reports on these things? What are the incentives?
I think the reporting structures are well set up, and there are actually, we were speaking about private employers, for example, who meet the targets being rewarded for taking positive steps towards realizing the terms.
So
that is
it's all
something
nice.
that is something that is written into the legislation. The financing can't be written on it. We'll hear on the 11th of March what the financing is available for implementation of the Affirmative Action Act, if any. There is the question of the financing of the gender ministry in particular. I wanted to ask you ladies about that. I think we also still have on the line to us Okbel Majdoub, who I thought had to leave us because she had another engagement, but I see has stayed on. So Okbel, please join in the discussion. I'm glad you can hear us. But talking about the gender ministry, some people would ask, why do we have to have a standalone gender ministry? After all, the whole legislation is about quote-unquote mainstreaming the idea of gender and making women central to your thinking, no matter what you're talking about. You could be talking about defence. What are the priorities or the imperatives of women in relation to defence and security? When it comes to health, what are women's priorities and things that they're looking for? Why have a ministry of gender, and particularly one that is so spectacularly under-equipped? A bit like the former Ministry of Information. It's a minuscule budget covering women, social protection, and children. Cozy.
So, again, even based on the conversation we just had now, we have 50% of our population being women, and we still have issues that women can't overcome. Gender-based violence, domestic violence, access to financing when it comes to business.
Okbel had a thing or two to say about that, and Dr. Jamina
gamut-
Bwadje had a thing or two to say about domestic violence.
There's a whole gamut of deficiencies. So, again, it comes back to being intentional. The gender ministry has its full scope as far as functions are concerned, and you called it when you said it seems to be inadequately resourced. They also have a lot of support. World Bank, all these organizations. There are so many resources you can unlock if you have the right leadership in place. I think that causes like, let's talk about, for instance, it's so sensitive because I remember reading a former colleague posting about sexual harassment or what she faced, and I thought it would trigger a conversation nationally. But again, women would not necessarily push or champion the
NF, National Film.
National Film
I just
Authority.
read it this
But
morning.
even this
is
week,
Yaa
follow
Mensah.
from Nigeria, Senator Natasha,
we
where
spoke
the
about
Senate
that
has
too.
four
Yes.
women in the Senate, and one
Accusing
says,
the Senate President of
yes,
sexual
one says
harassment.
I've been sexually harassed by the Senate President, and how it's been treated is moved from she being
She demonized.
she used to date this person. Yes, she dated somebody, she's married now. The two can exist. You can be someone's wife and somebody will sexually harass you. Then it became the President Senate's wife actually suing her, saying that her husband, and this is new. I'm like, wow, Nigeria is a beautiful Netflix documentary at this point.
In a
'Cause I
place
never
where
saw
we
that
thought
coming.
women were so powerful as well.
Exactly. And yesterday, she's been suspended for 6 months from the Senate. I mean, it's such a harsh, decision, because it means you deny her conscience or representation for what, 6 months? Like, how does that work? But it goes to show how certain issues are difficult to prove, but they've happened. People use technology in so many ways. There are people who turn on notifications, who tell you have 24. They have the 24-hour whatever on their WhatsApp, and they can send all sort of lewd messages, inappropriate messages, suggestive messages to women. And if you do not screenshot to have proof that this person came at you wrongly, there's no evidence that they
It will
even did
just
that.
vanish.
Or the things that they say in the offices, the things people, and it's an epidemic because men don't even know that these things they say are inappropriate, or how suggestive they are to women. Sometimes they even think it's a compliment to make a woman feel good, the things that you say to them, but it's not. So I've just been watching what she's going through, and I've seen other women call it out and say, support her, she needs support. But every woman in the Senate is actually against her. So it's quite a lonely space for her
You
to be
can
in,
you
but-
can be denied by the very people you think would provide you with your stronger support.
Exactly.
And I know, Cozy, you sat here in the studio with Auntie Elizabeth Ohene, where she recounted a story from about 50 or 60 years ago, and finding her first job as a journalist on national newspaper, and her introduction to the newsroom was a man inviting her to put her hand down his trousers and feel how big he was. That was her introduction to news, to life in news. Yes, not an experience that I think you're giving to anybody at Glitz
So
Africa,
one-
Claudia.
the-
That was what it was like. It has been around for a long time. But Okbel, sorry, because
But just to end it, the ministry should exist because when it comes to social protection, women do not have enough advocacy. We need reforms, we need policy, we need protection systems in place so that women feel empowered and safe to operate.
Okbel, if I could turn to you, is a gender ministry strictly necessary? You spoke about the need for networks, the need for financing. In your particular profession, you're talking about access to financing to produce creative work, products that you can use to put Ghana on the world stage, export made in Ghana products, make us proud, create jobs for young people and for people in communities that are very underserved. Will a gender ministry help you to promote that agenda?
Okay, I'm very excited to have the team that are in studio, especially with Claudia, because she'll tell you how intentional we've been about our diaries from London all the way down to Ghana in our careers and all that, and advocating in terms of for women. It's been very true experiences, and for me, I think the gender ministry would be a very good point where for people who are women advocates, for people who are pushing to see the women on the world stages, and not just in our African continent, but also to be able to push our women with what we have in terms of our skills, in terms of our desire to see our works out there. The gender ministry is one of the ministries I'm looking up to. I'm looking forward to what they have for our women, and looking forward to seeing that new reform change that they would actually bring to make the women voices, to make the women businesses head, to make the women skills seen, and to be able to push our Ghanaian economy to where it has to be with women-generated businesses. And so I think it's one of the ministries they should focus in. They should actually be able to empower the women. And I think empowering one woman empowers 1,000 more. And I mean, there is more advocates of stories to be shared once we have women being seen in what they do. Typically, they would say women are more conscious, women are more careful, women are more, and I would even say women at the end of the day are more intentional than anyone else, than I would put it to any other gender. And when the balance is there, of course, it should be for women.
Now, Auntie Gloria, I'll turn to you though, because you wanted to interject, but also to ask you to tee off your contribution. When it comes to women, another area that is much ignored is the gender pay gap. We heard a little bit about this because there was a bit of a news flurry about it last year. The disparity in how much women earn and men earn for the same job. I believe the Ghana Statistical Service, in its annual income and expenditure survey that it conducts from quarter to quarter, had found that for the first 2 quarters of 2022, there was something, an unadjusted average of a 37% plus difference between what women earn, women earning something in the region of 60 and 90 pesos per hour of work, compared to something like 11 plus for men. But obviously, with increasing education, as you go up the pay scale and into the formal economy, the gap narrows, but it doesn't entirely close. That was the finding of the Ghana Statistical Service. And yet you had the then president of the Ghana Employers Association appearing on a public platform and saying, oh, he didn't believe there was any difference between what women and men earned in the formal economy at high levels, because he knows of an all-female team at Nestle that is doing fantastic things with engineering, and they can do what any man can do. And on the basis of no evidence about what they were actually earning, what the comparative figures were for men, and the fact that this is the finding of the Ghana Statistical Service doing neutral surveys. It's not, but he continued to deny that there is a gender pay gap. Talking about the position of the gender ministry and this new legislation, how well equipped do you think they are?
Legislation?
Well, the Affirmative Action Act. How well equipped do you think they are? What kind of machinery do we need to deliver the thing that, I mean, is what we feel in our pockets, right? What we're all interested in at the moment. Narrowing that pay gap, if not closing it up altogether.
I think that's very good to know, because anytime we talk of equal pay for equal work, we assume it's a Western problem. So now that there's evidence that it's a local problem, I'll believe that employers, the trade unions, Congress, and civil society, together with Parliament and policymakers, should start looking at equal pay for equal work. If you call that feminism, equal pay for equal work in Ghana. Because I know that in the area of agriculture, when it comes to the food value chain, usually women, when it comes to grains, they plant it, and the daily wages, not very impressive.
They supply the bulk of food that we eat, and they earn
plant
the least.
Grains,
right.
And it's not very impressive. But those who do the spraying and those who drive the tractors earn more in a day. So you found GIZ supporting women to be trained, I think in Adidome Agric Institute and Wencha Agric Institute, to learn how to ride tractors.
This is the German International Development Organization.
Yes.
And indeed, recently at the National Economic Dialogues, we have had one of the major demands being made that more agricultural institutes be opened up across Ghana to train people in agricultural skills.
Yes, so with the
including
tractor,
women, one hopes.
Yeah, with the women driving tractors, it means they can also equally earn some more money than just planting. But equal pay for equal work would now be our advocacy.
Well,
Just
we
as-
have, Auntie Gloria, sorry to interrupt, but we have seen, for example, attempts to empower Kaye in the recent
Well, it
past.
hasn't worked out.
And training them, for example, just to drive buses.
You
And the
know,
backlash that there was against
Yes,
that.
in fact, that
How do you
reminds
fight that?
That reminds me. There's this big structure at Medina that has been, there used to be KIAs in there. Was
The hostel.
a training center, and now it's abandoned.
Oh, really?
So I'll humbly plead with the MC for La Quanta 9. Their offices are just across the road to bring the KIAs back, because KIAs are, they transcend political changes. So if, as a result of political change, the hostels were abandoned because of political reasons that is coming from one party, they should just ignore that. Look at the human rights of the KIA. Have them in the hostels, train them, and replicate it across the nation, especially in the districts and regions like Kumasi and other areas where the migrant population of young girls from the northern regions are very strong. It should transcend political changes. But coming to the affirmative action, there are two key things that Rwanda has. I visited Rwanda, and which I recommended for the legislation, but which we find missing. The first was a gender equality commission, an independent gender equality commission with a gender equality commissioner. We've already indicated the benefits of having gender equality. We don't have that in our legislation. When Nanoye initiated the bill, she initiated it, I think, 2011,
She was talking about that
Yes,
in the earliest days of writing
of
the
course,
legislation.
there's been a lot of work going on
2013,
before then.
2020.
But there was even the 1999 affirmative action gender policy. Now, when it was initiated, there was a commission. Then somewhere along the line, it's gone through about 5 or 6
Rewrite
ministers.
after rewrite,
Yes,
minister
that's
after
one
minister.
of the longest and revised legislations I've ever seen. Longest period in terms of its passage. But it changed from commission to committee.
Right.
And so it's not a commission anymore. It's not an independent anymore. In the legislation, it's a committee under the gender ministry.
Right.
And usually when you look at these legislations, the committees must always have representatives from ministries, departments, and agencies of states. And that is yet to be formed. Secondly, one of my students in Legon, the human rights of women, the masters, was saying that we keep saying that the formal sector, that's the governance sector, is just 15%. Majority are informal. So why do we have a committee that has only representatives of ministries, departments, and agencies of state, and none from the informal sector? We have something about private person and all that. So when we are having legislation, I recommend that it goes round. In fact, there was a time I said every MP should go round with maybe a little of his common fund and meet society, civil society, chiefs, traditional authorities, school children, and discuss legislation which affects all of us before it's passed. I don't know why we didn't, and all these things are there, and then a legislation has been passed, but it cannot be implemented. You get the point.
Yeah.
So if we could get an independent commission with a gender equality commissioner, it will help. And if we can move it from the gender ministry, because the gender ministry is not even budgeted for. As usual, people don't understand the role of, when they hear of gender, they think it's something that should be thrown away, silent, irrelevant, and should, be starved. But I think we still have to keep educating people.
There's a
that
fear of women finding their real power.
Oh, well, whatever.
And
we
also
should
an
keep on talking
insistence-
about gender equality.
Yeah.
It helps the home. If you have a family which have both women and men educated, it helps. Or even empowered, because a friend of mine who comes from Upper East, the Sandema area, said that, Auntie Gloria, you won't believe it, but now if you go to my village, every house that is being put up with a cement block or modern house is being sponsored by a woman. Maybe a groundnut seller in Accra. They sell groundnuts, and yet they are so empowered to send the money up north to build structures, to build homes for families. So empowering women helps the husbands, helps the fathers, the brothers, and society. and helps the government. So let's not, always sideline, gender, and
It's
all that.
It's,
And
it's
then
that insistence on treating women as peripheral, even though we are the majority of the population. A former minister of gender has sat in that chair where you're sitting now, Auntie Gloria, almost in tears. This was after the lynching of Equadente. The senior woman who was accused of being a witch by some distant family members and members of the community. Well, we please know the anti-witchcraft bill, which certain members of parliament are talking about reviving, does cover both witches and wizards. As you say, big up, non-gendered, non-discrimination under the anti-witchcraft bill. But she sat virtually in tears because she said, look, this is where she had come from. She had worked with the aged, senior citizens, and she just seeing pictures of that woman as she was being stoned by people in her community, she just wanted to take that woman into her arms and take her away from the people, but knew that that wasn't a solution to the problem. And in any case, her ministry, her department didn't have the money to do that intervention. It had to be a police intervention, it was temporary, and then the woman was returned to her community, and that was when she was killed. They came for her not once, they came for at least twice. Now, so I
all
want...
their problems stopped? No.
And have all the problems? No. Women keep on
Yeah,
getting
and
burned
more women.
or attacked,
remember, I think
accused of being
2018.
witches. It's almost an annual, if not multi-annual occurrence. Claudia, on what we hope is, because we shouldn't end on a downer. We've talked about the things that we have achieved in the 50 years of International Women's Day, even though it seems sometimes as if we're treading over the same old territory, revisiting the same old questions over and over again. We have just, of course, this week celebrated Ghana's 68th anniversary, of independence and the greater liberties that it's brought. We talked about Nkrumah's record in trying to get women into parliament, possibly by way of a reward because of favours they had done him, and also understanding of the importance of women as organisers, mass mobilisers of voters for his party. I wondered, looking forward to the 2 years before Ghana hits 70, it's shocking sure thought, it's not that far away. What would you like to see achieved between now and that crucial anniversary in 2027 by way of women and consolidating their position in Ghanaian life?
Thank you, Nana, for this conversation and everything that's happened in this room. Today is all about progress, right? There's so much that's been done, and we want to see more being done. And it's also very clear that we need strong implementation from the conversations that we've had here. I think that they still need a gender ministry. As Miss Gloria said, a commission in charge of that. But my thing is that
affirmative action.
Yeah. But what I am hoping that, and that's my fear, that we pass this law and it will not be implemented. We don't have strong implementation measures to make sure that it's being seen through. Is once we have that and we give, who's the mandate is on who? Is it the gender ministry that is going to own this act to make sure that it's being implemented, and who question who, or who answers to who, based to make sure that it happens?
Well, we have a new Minister of Gender. Of course, the lady who saw it through, Dakwa Newman, is no longer a member of Parliament. We have Agnes Nama Mulate, who is the new Minister for Gender, and it's one of the things that she has already spoken about in Parliament, as she's very aware of it being on her radar, something that she has to implement. Do you think she's going to get the support to implement it?
That's the hope, because also for a woman, for her, she needs to be strong for all women, because she's the leader for women. She's the leader for all of us. So she needs to make sure that we're sitting at the table with the Ministry of Finance. And let me just bring this in, because it's leadership, it's inspiration, it's leading by example, right? If President Mahama is listening to this, we're grateful that we have a vice president who is a woman, right? We are grateful. I am like, it's an inspiration for all of us, inspiration for my daughter, for women, young women in politics. Now we can see that there's hope for all of us. We can all achieve and be great. But just giving us a female vice president doesn't mean that all the other areas can not also have 30%, because I saw cabinet ministers and there's only 2 or 3 of them that are in cabinet who are women. So I'm hoping that in the political circle as well, they give this woman who is in charge of gender the financial support and backing to make sure that we are not just saying and putting a bill or an act there, but we are intentional about it. We are putting progressive measures in place. They are showing in leadership as well that, you know, we are leading by example. We are making sure that it's not just, you know, all the ministries, all the appointments that we're doing. We're showing that we want to achieve this 2030 percentage or whatever we want to do, like 50% or whatever by 2030. We need to show by leadership, by example, and then that will also inspire then private businesses to now also start leaning in and also making sure these things are being done. They should set clear examples. They should, as you said, they should make sure that they are giving people incentive. Let people actually see that, oh, this enterprise now have moved this into here and they're being honored by the president at the presidency. We're honoring these 2-3 companies because for the last year or 2 we've seen progress, and when it comes to affirmative action, if we're seeing actionable, if we're actually seeing things, then it will inspire other people to do well. But if not, and we're not being intentional about it, and we're just putting another policy, now we will be here in 2 years and we'll be saying the same thing, and it'll just be a bill that's been sitting there. And that is my fear, and that's
An
what,
act, yeah, it's been passed by Parliament.
but it's just, it's an act, but we will just come back in 2 years and it will just be sitting there looking pretty.
It was not an act, in fact, it was a gesture. It was gesture politics. Cozy, if I turn to you briefly, in the next couple of years, what do you want to see happen? Is there one key thing, one key change that you would like to see that would consolidate women's position? And does the Ministry of Gender play a role in this?
So I think the next 50 years of International Women's Day should not be just looking back to see the progress we made. We should be able to set clear goals and say that in the next decade across the world, these are the things we want to see. In the next decade across Africa, these are the things we want to see. And I think what Madame Gloria said with the gender commissioner, gender equality commissioner, is such a brilliant idea, because other African countries learn from us as far as policy making is concerned. Why can't we learn from them as well? Because for the law to work, it will be meaningless without a great implementer. I'm happy that Nana Bampo was here today, and in the position she currently occupies as Deputy Chief of Staff, and having been a former gender minister, knowing the bottlenecks and the challenges she had, it'll be amazing for her to lend a helping hand to the current gender minister and all the things that she couldn't realize in her tenure as a gender minister, to ensure that they tick the boxes and achieve those things. I've seen certain arguments on X and other social media pages where the men say, oh, we've given you a female vice president. Yes, we love it. It's awesome. She's from Wesley Girls. It's a big, thumbs up to us once again for, making it a fest. But it doesn't necessarily, it doesn't mean that is all in all, and everything else shouldn't matter. Because that's the arguments I see people online say when it comes to, there are not enough women here. They're like, we gave you a female vice president. It's as if she's supposed to embody everything.
She carries the whole weight of expectations about gender affirmation on her shoulders.
Keeping women out in other spaces.
But it's a big step. It is a big step.
Oh, it is. It's an amazing step. It's awesome. I mean, on any day, it's phenomenal. I mean, Ghana has done it, but it's still work to be done. 50% women, less than 50% in parliament. It's not enough. Let's be intentional. Carve certain spots. Why we can amend all these things. Even constitutional reforms are happening right now. You're sitting down. Professor H. Kwesi Prempeh, he's actually what we have in common is a common birthday, and I'm hoping that gender equality,
the chair of our constitutional review
is
committee,
having that provision locked in our constitution is a matter of necessity, and we need to do everything possible to ensure that we empower women and make sure that in the next 50 years, and to reiterate, it has to be clear goals on what we want to achieve.
But beyond the 50 years, which is a very long time frame and a bit like really trying to look down a very long, a 50-kilometer tunnel, just over the next 2 years, one concrete thing that you want to see happen, very briefly.
Oh, in Ghana?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so I want to see the affirmative action bill actually take root in everything from private sector, seeing the provision of having a minimum of
The act
the
is
act.
passed now.
It has to. We want to see it because you see the catalyst in the private sector would also push for government institutions to make concessions and make amendments. So I want to see more representation on boards, not the what do we call it? Not that one
Tokenism.
the tokenism
One or
should
two.
in 2 years the tokenism can end if we are intentional about changing certain provisions as far as board constitutions and female representation is concerned.
Okbel, again, very briefly, Auntie Gloria, I'll give you the last word, but Okbel, if I could turn to you and ask, listening to that from your creative businesswoman's point of view, Ghana at 68, us having won liberty with the large assistance of women, but over the next 2 years before we turn 70, which is that's 70, isn't it? That's our God-given lot. What would you like to see happen to achieve better opportunities and rights for women and girls?
Okay. I'd want to see in the next 2 years before we turn into 70, more advancements into technology for women, more support in terms of finances, finance for women-led businesses. I'd also want to have more women-driven governance policies that would have more advocates to women voices, and to be able to drive that change in our businesses from just being dominated by men segments, and also pronouncing the women into high positions where the business markets can also be open for women.
I sense where that's coming from. That's coming from a deeply felt place in relation to your own business, Okbel Bedwe Majdub. And Auntie Gloria, turning to you.
Yes.
You have in the past been quite scathing about the draft affirmative action. It was then Equality Bill. It ended up being Gender Equity Bill. Gender Equity Act. It now is 2024. Over and above the legislation, are there key things that you want to see achieved over the next couple of years, or for you is it just one long continuum?
I just want the African Charter on Democracy and Elections and Governance, which provides for 50-50 representation at the AU right now to the grassroots in Africa.
This is part of Agenda 2063.
No, it's something that was passed in 2003 by African heads of states. So I want it to be implemented in Ghana so that we don't do 2030, we do 50, because AU and all the presidents signed on it. But I want to mention that Betty Moldidriso, who is now Auntie Betty, who is now the member of Council of State, was very instrumental also in women's rights, especially the DV, the domestic violence in Ghana, because I remember she helped us through EU, Fitnat Ajite and I, while I was at FIDA, to draft the first study, of domestic violence by an institution in Ghana. And then we went on with the legislation, we worked on it, and as a private members bill led by FIDA, then LAWA and other women groups. And FIDA, who led it, submitted that to the then Attorney General on 27th November 2001. The then Attorney General was Nanado, the deputy was Gloria Ekufu, and then we had the special assistant Xtra. So
and I think we're seeing some pictures. Viewers on Facebook can see those pictures with a very young former president, a very young-looking, indeed, Ursula Usu Ekufu, then just Ursula Usu, I think.
And then Gloria, Gloria.
And Honourable Gloria looking very beamy. And understandably, it was a very proud day for you. The beginnings of the legislation.
November 2001. That's when we handed handed the legislation to government to sponsor, and it came into being in 2007.
Wow.
That's really
our
nice.
legislations always take long, right? But it applies to everybody. So we should keep teaching about domestic violence, teaching about it, so that people right from childhood will know that it's not right to have, violence in your home or with people you know, or with your spouse or girlfriend or boyfriend. And then there will be some form of informative action also with the police. We should keep training the police, keep training the judges. It's non-stop. The members of parliament, civil society, media. It has to be going on and on and on, so that we can have a violence-free home and also society.
Nanaya, can we just, somebody that we shouldn't forget to mention is Mrs. Rollins.
Nana
Nana
Kuredu
Kuredu, I mean, wherever she is,
Nanoye
Mommy, we are
Lefa.
wishing you a happy International Women's Day,
yes.
Yeah.
because this is a woman that we grew up watching her fighting for women, right,
Yes.
and empowering women. So I think that for whatever journey Ghana has been on when it comes to empowering women, and she has been a key part. And on a day like this, we need to really give her flowers.
Yes.
Nanoye
And
Bampuado
did-
did,
Oh, she mentioned that,
definitely
yeah.
mention
And
her.
of course, Her Excellency Samira Baumia as well. I mean, everybody knows she's always fighting for women issues and out there. So we wish you all, wherever you
Yes.
all are,
And a very big one
International
to Her Excellency.
Women's Day.
Mrs. Rebecca Kufuor.
Another big one to Mrs. Rebecca Kufuor. A very big one to Samia Nkrumah for the work that she's done. She's at the moment ploughing her own furrow, trying to show that it is possible to create agribusiness out of something that is a long-standing thing that is grown in the Jamora area, and nothing has been done with developing the value chain. She's decided to put her hands to work where the theory has always been, as developed by other economists, and actually do that. The first woman to lead a major national political party in our country, before even Nana Kuredu Rawlings set up a National Democratic Party. Samia Nkrumah taking up the mantle there against some resistance, it must be said, from the men in the ranks of the CPP. But yes, congratulations to all our women, and I hope that listeners out there have found this a very non-partisan and fair-handed discussion when it comes to issues of women and what women and girls want to see, just the little opportunities, the little openings that help them to realise their lives. It's not about partisan politics, despite what Abdul Basit Mahama had to say on our Facebook lines about the way women vote. And there are questions to be asked in some areas, as we discussed in the course of our conversation, about the pushback from some women voters who just do not like women putting their head above the parapet. Some people would call it tall poppy syndrome. Abdul Basit Mahama on Facebook just greeting you again, and he says it is imperative that think tanks or think tankers like Madam Gloria and Nanoye Bampuado pay attention to ill-informed, self-styled feminists who run TV shows, he says, confusing the young ones with frivolity, fluffy content and melodramatic, salacious discussions. Sometimes that is what passes for girl power in our day and age.
Oh, true.
With some of these podcasts coming up, the content is quite problematic.
Yeah.
Very problematic, not to mention the social media pictures that you spoke about earlier on, and they get, more and more risque, it seems, with every passing day. Also watching us on Facebook, again, Eunice Champama, her responses, Abdul Basit Mahama, it's about having a space and an enabling environment including all women. That's inclusion and diversity, not necessarily tokenism. But Abdul Basit Mahama had some suggestions for a formula, perhaps for electing women, which are above my ken. I'm not very scientific. Eunice Champa was saying, yes, was Nanoye Bampuado gone? Yes, unfortunately, she joined us for the top end of our program, but she has many engagements, as you might imagine, with the roots in her history with organising for women and promoting women's rights. So she had to rush off to another engagement. We're sorry we didn't have her on for long, but we hope next time she comes to join us in the studio, she's able to stay for a bit longer. And Duvor Abraham Cletus says, good presentation to my boss and peopleness, Claudia Abna Kwating Luma. great impact she has made and continues to make in Oforikrum. Kudos to her. Well, I think you have a vote of confidence there, certainly from Duvo Abraham Cletus. But I think that's all we have time for. We've enjoyed having you. We hope you've enjoyed this discussion, and we wish it could carry on for another hour. But there's a certain man at our door who is threatening to break it down because he wants to come in here and talk about sports. And we didn't even get round to talking about women in sports. We wish the Black Queens in camp in Morocco the very best. Cozy will know more about this than most of us with her interest in sport. And we say thank you for joining us on International Women's Day.
Thanks for having us.
We wish you
for having
all joy and blessings and another good few years of progress, and we hope to see implementation of that.
Thank you. Danaya, and you are amazing, amazing. So keep up the great work that you do here.
The head is fat enough. And good morning to all our listeners.
work.
Stay tuned to Asaase 99.5. Coming up next is Team Talk on Asaase Radio.
I appreciate Abdul Basit's formula. Okay. Let me